When you walk through a forest, it's really easy to just see it as, well, a bunch of trees. But what if I told you it's actually a perfect, self-sustaining machine? Every single part, from the tallest tree all the way down to the tiniest microbe in the soil, has a job to do. So let's pull back the curtain and see exactly how this incredible system works. And that brings us to a really fascinating question. Think about it. In a system that's just teeming with life, there's also a lot of death, right? Fallen leaves, dead branches, animals. So how is it possible that absolutely nothing ever goes to waste? The answer to that is really the key to understanding the genius of the forest. So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the forest as one big living system. Then we'll dive into its amazing zero-waste recycling process. It's seriously cool. After that, we'll zoom out to see the huge role forests play as guardians of our entire planet. And finally, we'll bring it all back home and see why this matters to you. All right, let's get right into it with the forest internal ecosystem. We're going to explore all the hidden relationships and surprising partnerships between everything that lives there, from the biggest animals all the way down to the tiniest little insects. Okay, so we usually think of the plants as the stage and the animals as the actors on that stage, but really it's a true partnership. So how exactly do animals, we're talking everything from bees to bears, actively help the forest grow and thrive? Well, this incredible partnership works in a few key ways. First off, animals are like the forest's delivery service, spreading seeds to new places, sometimes miles away. Second, their waste acts as a perfect, all-natural fertilizer, giving the soil the nutrients it needs. And finally, even when they die, their bodies decompose and return all those vital elements back to the soil. It's this perfect, self-renewing cycle. So we're seeing this amazing collaboration going on. But it's not just about having animals around, it's about having a variety of them, a ton of different species. Why is that biodiversity so absolutely critical to keeping a forest healthy and strong? This is where you see just how delicate that balance is. Just imagine what happens if you pull one piece out. Take away the carnivores, for instance. Suddenly, the herbivore population just explodes, and they eat all the plants until the whole system collapses. Or what if you got rid of the decomposers? Well, all the dead stuff would just pile up, locking away nutrients and polluting everything. The takeaway here is simple. Every single role is absolutely essential. And this idea that every role is vital, leads us straight to the forest's most incredible feature, its perfect zero-waste recycling system. This quote really just says it all, doesn't it? Forests aren't just good at recycling. They are excellent, perfect, and natural recycling factories. This is the big idea that solves that mystery we started with. So who are the workers in this amazing factory? They're the decomposers. These guys are the unsung heroes of the forest. We're talking tiny microorganisms like fungi and bacteria. Their whole job is to break down all the dead organic stuff, fallen leaves, wood, animal remains, and turn it into this dark, rich material called humus. And there it is. That's the answer to our big question. This is why there's no waste in a forest. The decomposers make sure that everything that dies gets converted right back into the food that new plants need to grow. Death literally fuels new life. It's a perfect continuous loop. Okay, so now that we get the genius of how the forest works on the inside, let's zoom out a bit. Because these self-sustaining systems don't just take care of themselves, they play a massive role in protecting and regulating our entire planet. Think about something like heavy rain. Forests are one of our best natural defenses against floods. The canopy of leaves acts like a giant umbrella, catching the downpour. This lets the water drip slowly to the forest floor, which then acts like a massive sponge, soaking it all up and preventing the soil from washing away and causing floods. And then there's the very air we breathe. This is where you see this beautiful, perfect symmetry. Through photosynthesis, plants breathe in the carbon dioxide that animals breathe out, and in return, they release the oxygen we need to live. Forests are quite literally the lungs of our planet, and they maintain this perfect, life-sustaining balance for all of us. So we've seen how forests work, and we've seen how they help the planet, but what does all of this mean for you, personally, in your day-to-day life? Let's make that connection crystal clear. Just think about your average day, the wood in your chair, the fruit and spices in your kitchen, the rubber in your shoes, even some really important medicines. So many of these essential things come directly from forests. Our dependence on them is deep, and a lot of the time it's completely invisible to us. You know, this is a fair question, isn't it? If you live in a big city, maybe miles and miles from the nearest large forest, it's easy to feel disconnected. Why should you care about what's happening in some distant ecosystem? Because the consequences are global. They affect everyone. When we lose forests, we see more floods and soil erosion. It pumps more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which speeds up climate change for all of us. It destroys the homes of countless animals and leads to shortages of those very products we all rely on. A problem that starts far away will absolutely find its way to our own doorstep. So let's end right where we started. We've seen that a forest is a perfect zero-waste system where everything is recycled and every single piece has a purpose. The final question then is this. In a world that's struggling with waste and sustainability, what can we learn from the forest's ancient, brilliant design? Hey there and welcome. Today we're going to dive into one of nature's most incredible designs, the forest ecosystem. We're going to explore how this super complex world functions with, believe it or not, zero waste and just amazing efficiency. So let's get right into it. Have you ever just stood inside a forest and wondered, how does all of this actually work? I mean, how does it grow and regenerate and sustain itself with absolutely no help from the outside world? That's the big question we're going to tackle today. All right, first up, we're going to look inward at what makes a forest tick. Think of it like its internal engine, a masterful recycling system that leaves absolutely nothing behind. And that leads us to a really simple but kind of profound question. You know, in our human world, we create so much waste. So how does a forest manage to have none at all? Well, the answer is that a forest is basically a perfect natural recycling factory. Everything is connected. You've got herbivores eating plants, carnivores eating herbivores, and eventually every single thing becomes food for something else. It's this huge interconnected food web where nothing, and I mean nothing, is ever just thrown away. But here's the thing. For this perfect system to actually work, it relies on some of the smallest but most powerful residents of the forest floor, the ones you almost never see. So, who are these crucial players? Well, they're called decomposers. But what exactly are they? And here we go. Decomposers are microorganisms, mostly fungi and bacteria. Their whole job, their entire purpose, is to take all the dead stuff, plants and animals, and convert it into this amazing substance called humus. You can think of them as the ultimate cleanup and recycling crew for the entire ecosystem. And it all happens in this simple, really elegant three-step cycle. First, the decomposers get to work breaking down all the dead organic matter. You know, fallen leaves, branches, dead animals, the works. Second, they transform all of that into that nutrient-rich humus we just mentioned. And third, that humus goes on to enrich the soil, providing all the essential minerals for new life to grow. It's literally the circle of life, happening right there on the forest floor. Now, it's not just the tiny microorganisms doing all the heavy lifting. The bigger animals we see, they all have a super important role to play in helping the forest grow and regenerate. But how do they do it? Well, it turns out that animals are basically the forest's master gardeners. They disperse seeds, carrying them to totally new places to sprout. Their droppings act as a natural fertilizer, enriching the soil wherever they happen to go. And then, when they eventually die, their bodies are returned right back into the system, providing a feast for those decomposers and completing that nutrient cycle we just saw. Okay, so now let's zoom out a bit. A forest isn't just a self-contained little world. It plays a massive role in supporting the entire planet. They're often called our planet's green lungs, and for really, really good reason. So one of its biggest jobs has to do with water. How in the world do forests actually help prevent floods? The answer is just so beautifully simple. A forest acts like a giant natural sponge. When rain falls, it doesn't just hammer the ground. First, it hits that canopy of leaves, then it drips slowly down to the forest floor. From there, all those complex root systems help the water seep slowly into the ground instead of just running off all at once. And then, of course, there's the very air we breathe. This might be the most famous role a forest plays, but how does it really maintain that delicate balance between the oxygen we all need and the carbon dioxide we all produce? It all comes down to this: the great exchange. It's like a perfect partnership. We animals, we breathe in oxygen and we exhale carbon dioxide. Well, plants do the exact opposite. Through photosynthesis, they take in our carbon dioxide and release fresh oxygen back into the air. They are, quite literally, our perfect partners in keeping the atmosphere just right for all of us. Okay, so we've seen the forest's internal system, we've seen its global impact. Now let's bring it right into our own homes. Let's look at the tangible things we get from forests every single day. Seriously, just take a second and think about your day. What products have you used that actually, originally, came from a forest? The list is probably way longer than you think. I mean, of course there's the obvious one, timber for wood and paper. But forests also give us fruits, vegetables, spices, and gums. They provide industrial products like the turpentine you find in paint or the latex for rubber. And get this, many life-saving medicines have their origins in plants found deep inside these incredible ecosystems. All of this brings us to our final and honestly our most important section. Understanding how a forest works is one thing. Understanding why we absolutely must protect them is another. This is a truly global responsibility. You know, it's pretty easy to feel disconnected from a rainforest that's thousands of miles away, right? But that brings up a really critical question. Why should we worry about forests that are so far from where we live? The hard truth is, we are all connected. The loss of forests, what we call deforestation, it directly leads to more floods and more soil erosion. It actually makes global warming worse by removing the very trees that are supposed to absorb carbon dioxide from our atmosphere. It means a devastating loss of habitat for countless species, and it threatens the future of all those essential products we were just talking about. It really just boils down to this. We simply cannot separate our own well-being from the well-being of the world's forests. The health of our planet is tied directly to the health of its forests. So throughout this explainer, we've seen everything a forest does for us. It provides clean air, fresh water, essential products, a stable climate. The list goes on and on. So the final question isn't what the forest does for us. The final question is, what are we doing for the forest?